This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. We begin tonight with a story that has countless Manitoba families concerned about the safety of people they love. Day 4 of Israel's conflict with Hamas. Officials say more than 1,000 people have been killed in Israel. Palestinians report at least 830 deaths. Thousands more are wounded on both sides. Israel says it has secured its border with Gaza. No food, water, fuel, or medicine is allowed into the territory. Aid groups are urging the creation of a humanitarian corridor to bring assistance into Gaza, where morgues are overwhelmed. Meantime, rockets continue to rain down on Israeli cities from the territory. Israel says Hamas is holding more than 100 soldiers and civilians hostage. As the violence continues and the death toll rises, Winnipeggers worry for the safety of their friends and family. CBC's Brittany Greenslade reports.
4 of these people have already been called up or on active search duty in the army.
For the last few days, Avram Shirak has been checking in on his family in Israel. It's been sleepless nights and restless days.
And getting news no one should get. Thank God my 25 immediate relatives are alive and safe, but not a lot of some of their friends are not.
More than 1,800 lives have been lost since Hamas opened fire at the Supernova Music Festival Saturday morning, roughly 5 kilometers from the Gaza Strip in southern Israel, launching the Middle East into war for the last 4 days. Shirak's nephew was set to perform at the festival. He turned around when he heard missiles.
So this morning I finally got the guts to ask him. My exact question was, I'm afraid to ask you, but how many have you lost so far? And he said 50 so far, and they haven't finished counting. 50 of his friends.
Hamas has fired barrages of rockets. Hostages have been taken on both sides, and Israel warplanes are pounding the Gaza Strip in retaliation.
We've got a spot here. I'm going to turn this around a little bit so you can see.
Former Winnipegger Jenny Menashe is in northern Israel sorting supplies for soldiers, while reassuring family back home in Canada they are safe for now.
I keep saying physically, we're okay, as in we're still alive. Nobody's missing a leg, nobody's been shot. But emotionally, this is shock. We're all kind of just functioning in shock, and everybody's doing what they can.
Like many, her son is being called to fight.
He'll be back Thursday morning from the U.S. and he's going straight to the Army. And I have a daughter who's in the Army. And then I have 2 younger ones who, like I said, today went to the supermarket and helped stock shelves.
Phil Reese, who lived near New York during 9/11, says people are in shock.
And the feeling is in many ways reminiscent of what it was like on and just after September 11th. It's surreal. People can't understand, can't believe what's just happened.
He attended the funeral for his neighbor's 21-year-old son tonight, the second victim close to the family. His son's classmate also lost an older brother. He
was shot. He took 2 bullets to the head and kept on fighting, but eventually was shot again and killed.
I mean, everyone is affected.
Phone calls and tragedies Reese and Shirak wish they didn't have to share. Brittany Greenslade, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Former Winnipegger Vivien Silver's small community in Israel was attacked by militants. Officials say more than 100 bodies have been found there. Vivien Arsenault spoke with her son last night, who just wants to know what happened to her.
Canadian Vivien Silver smiles so broadly in almost every photo, especially when doing what she's worked on for decades, advocating for peace between Israelis and Palestinians.
I live on the border of the Gaza Strip in a kibbutz.
This was just a few years ago.
That's why I have a personal stake in resolving the conflict.
Where is she now? That is what haunts her son, Yonatan.
I don't think she's missing. I think she's either dead in her house or being held in Gaza.
Saturday morning, his mom was at home alone on kibbutz Be'eri, a place that by the end of the day would be brutalized. When the rocket started, she and Jonathan got on the phone.
I was on the phone with her until I heard shots outside of her window from in the room she was hiding. So we decided to stop talking on the phone so they don't hear her, and we moved to corresponding via WhatsApp. She wrote me that they're in the house, and that was it. Just expressed love for each other, and that was it.
He tracked her cell phone. It hasn't left the kibbutz. Has she? For 48 hours, Israeli forces have tried to secure communities near Gaza. It's not safe enough for him to go. Imagine that helplessness.
The first thing I want is information, to know that she's there and alive. Then I would want, efforts to be made to make contact with her, to know that she's well, not just alive. That she knows how much our efforts and how much she means to us.
A moment about where we're sitting. A Tel Aviv street that would normally throb with life on a fall night. Not now. A few hundred meters away, the remains of a rocket attack on that fateful Saturday. Jonathan heard that happen too. He lives meters away. No time to take any of this in. He is focused on his mom.
I call on the Israeli government in regards to the captive people. They use diplomacy, not go in by force, because I think that would endanger I want them to negotiate. And I hope the Canadians won't lose the interest and be involved.
Vivien's whole family, he says, is in Canada, which must feel so very far away.
That's Adrienne Arsenault. She is on the ground with other CBC journalists. You can see more of their coverage later in this program and also tonight on The National. A rally in support of Israel will be held this evening at 7 o'clock at the Asper Jewish Community Center. Yesterday, about 100 people gathered outside Winnipeg City Hall to rally in support of Palestinians. Damon Nasser helped organize that rally. He says Palestinians have been oppressed by Israel for decades.
After over 70 years of occupation, 70 years of attacks from the State of Israel, they finally, risen up and resisted. Not always in the best way, but it's to be expected.
Manitoba's incoming premier met Winnipeg's mayor this afternoon. They spent an hour together talking behind closed doors. As CBC's Bartley Kivas reports, the long meeting signals the continuation of warm relations between City Hall and the Manitoba legislature.
Premier-designate Wab Kinew enters City Hall, where he's met with a handshake from Mayor Scott Gillingham.
Yes, welcome to City Hall.
He gets another handshake from Councillor Janice Lukes.
Together. The two of you together are going to conquer the world.
World domination may not be on the minds of these two Manitoba leaders. They'll settle for continuing the warm relationship between the mayor and premier that began when outgoing Premier Heather Stephenson and former Mayor Brian Bowman warmed up a city-provincial relationship that practically froze over when Brian Pallister was Manitoba's leader. If today's any indication, Kinew and Gillingham are off to a chummy start.
We have had conversations certainly prior to the election, but this is our first chance. We've been able to sit down together.
One of those priorities is homelessness. Both leaders say they hope to emulate what Houston has done to reduce the number of people on its streets suffering from poverty, addictions, and mental health issues.
The homelessness issue is at the top of our shared agenda, and I think we're both committed to moving the ball forward there.
Both leaders also promised to complete upgrades underway at Winnipeg's largest sewage treatment plant. What they didn't do was hash out precisely how Kinew's NDP government will fund the city of Winnipeg.
At this stage, before we're even sworn in, I don't think I'm ruling too many things out, but I would ask for your patience as we stand up our new government.
Historically, Winnipeg mayors want something called basket funding, which is money with no strings attached. At this early stage of the relationship, it's Wab Kinew who left City Hall with a basket. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
If Manitoba Public Insurance has its way, there will be no rate change for Manitoba drivers. MPI started its annual Public Utilities Board hearings today. It is requesting no overall revenue or rate change for 2024-25. Its application to the PUB also proposes an expansion of the driver safety rating scale. It could mean a vehicle premium discount of 48% for those with the best driving record. The PUB is expected to issue its decision on rates in December. A nurse says service disruptions at some rural emergency departments are pushing healthcare workers in Virden to the limit. She's speaking out as communities in southwest Manitoba grapple with ER closures due to staffing shortages. As CBC's Josh Crabb reports, it's a problem the incoming NDP government will be tasked with fixing.
Located near busy highways in the middle of Manitoba's oil field, the emergency department at Virden Hospital can be a busy place. This nurse, who CBC has agreed not to identify, works in the community of just over 3,100 people. She says her job is getting more stressful and challenging, due in part to staffing shortages in other communities.
Our vacancy level is high, so there's a lot of fear to come to work, and that's never been the case.
Despite staffing struggles of its own, Virden's ER is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But some ERs in surrounding towns are not open all the time, and the nurse says that's only making matters worse. She says multiple ambulances arrive during overnight shifts. They bring patients who need cardiac, trauma, or mental health care. She says because Virden's ER is seen as more reliable, people also drive from other communities, including from Brandon, where wait times can be long.
Our facility sees a lot of that. Patients drive long distances to get here, and it's heavy, heavy care.
Melita Mayor Bill Holden says ER services in his community south of Virden were suspended after a longtime doctor retired in September. That's forcing people to go elsewhere, including to Virden in an emergency.
You close down all the feeder hospitals, and well, big surprise that your main ones are swamped. And the time factor it's just ridiculous.
Prairie Mountain Health provided statistics to CBC showing emergency department volumes in Virden this year are similar to the same time period last year. The health region says it closely monitors volumes and provides additional resources as needed to hospitals near locations that are experiencing ER service disruptions. The nurse says Virden Hospital relies heavily on agency nurses and mandating overtime. In an interview last week with CBC, Premier-designate Wab Kinew says hiring healthcare workers will be his government's #1 priority.
In addition to the pay and to the working conditions, I think we need to send them a message that we value your expertise. We're going to listen to you.
The nurse says the government needs to address burnout, stress, and nurse-to-patient ratios, but she says that will take time.
In terms of short-term solution, we need to beef up incentives. We're losing nurses.
She wants to continue nursing to help keep community members safe. Josh Crabb, CBC News, Virden.
Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuck say they are both committed to winning the Stanley Cup as Winnipeg Jets.
I guess you can sign either one. They're both the same.
The forward and goalie spoke in Winnipeg today after, or should I say as, each signed a 7-year contract extension worth $8.5 million US annually. The same contracts. The players talked about what it means to be part of the organization. Scheifele says he's honored to be staying with the team of his hero, Dale Hawerchuk.
I'll never be Dale Hawerchuk, but to know that he's up there watching down on all of us, and knowing that I'll be a lifetime Jet is pretty phenomenal, and definitely gives me the chills.
This organization believes in me the way I believe in myself, and that's kind of the way I've gotten to where I am now, and it's really hard to leave that. That breeds success, and I want to thank you guys a lot for believing in me the way I believe in myself, and now I'm ready to be a Jet for life and bring a cup to this city, because I truly believe that we can get it done here.
You know, that is the kind of stuff Jets fans like to hear. You were going to say?
It sounded like a guarantee, really. I mean,
he's committed.
We are going to win the Stanley Cup.
with these two players.
That's the right attitude. And takes a whole team, not just the two of them, but there you go.
Kind of feels like hockey season, doesn't it?
It does. It's getting fallish, John.
Fallish. Beautiful clear sky today. That is going to change. We're going to see very consistent weather this week, as you'll see in the long-range forecast. But let's start where we are right now. We did make it to 12.6 or so this afternoon at the airport, but that was only for 1 hour. It hung around 12 degrees most of the day, 11 right now. Dew point down at 0, so very dry atmosphere heading into those drier times of year. Northeast winds at 15. And kind of the same on the way for tomorrow, but a lot more cloud cover. The situation is like this. We've got a low pressure system to the south of us and to the southeast. And with a counterclockwise circulation, it's bringing an easterly flow back into southern Manitoba. Now today we had nice clear skies, but you can see a little bit more cloud cover out toward northwestern Ontario. Have a look at Futurecast. This isn't satellite or radar. This is a forecast model showing what satellite and radar may look like in the future. So as we go into tonight, overnight, we'll see increasing cloud from the east, and then that will just continue as we head through the day tomorrow. These arrows you see moving here are wind arrows, wind the direction it's moving, and from east to west, pretty much right through the day tomorrow. As we get into Thursday, a little bit more in the way of cloud cover, although I still think that we'll see some breaks in that cloud, especially on into the afternoon on Thursday, and then Thursday night we're cloudy on into Friday, where we start the day with a little bit of sunshine and end up with cloud cover in the afternoon. This is the upper level flow, and it really speaks to the consistency of our temperatures here in southern Manitoba through Saskatchewan, and it even gets a little bit warmer on the weekend in northern Manitoba than it will be here in the south. So with the cloud cover increasing tonight, I think we stay above 0, at least here in the Winnipeg area, below 0 out to the west toward the Saskatchewan border, because skies will be clearer for longer. So Brandon, you'll get frost again tonight. 4 degrees in the morning, mainly cloudy, the odd little patch of blue, and then those patches kind of increase in the afternoon. We're at about 11 degrees in the afternoon. East winds 10 to 20 kilometers per hour. And then as we go into the long range, as I'll show you a little bit later, we see these temperatures staying pretty much the same, Janet, day after day after day. We're looking at 11s and 12s through the rest of the week and right on through the weekend as well. And I'll show you the long-range forecast a little later.
Looking forward to that. Thank you, John.
You bet.
A fourth night of fear and retribution in the conflict between Israel and Hamas. CBC News The National has a team on the ground. We'll hear from Paul Hunter after the break.
When it comes to your news, you want up-to-the-minute access. Anytime, anywhere. Get the facts straight from the source. Download the free CBC News app or visit cbcnews.ca for news you can trust.
Israel is stepping up airstrikes in Gaza on day 4 of its conflict with Hamas. It's in retaliation for a surprise attack by militants on Saturday. The multi-pronged assault marked the single deadliest day ever for Israel. CBC's Paul Hunter is part of the CBC News team on the ground in the region. He has this report tonight from Jerusalem and a warning. Some of the images and descriptions in this item will be disturbing for some viewers.
It has been another day of relentless airstrikes in both directions, in and out of the Gaza Strip today. Israeli Defense Forces striking again and again and again Hamas structures inside the Gaza Strip. In return, Hamas rockets in wave after wave, barrage after barrage, targeting places in Israel, particularly Ashkelon, a community just north of the Gaza Strip along the coast. Beyond that, some sobering and gruesome imagery from one of the small kibbutzes just east of the Gaza Strip today, where Israeli Defense Forces brought journalists to see some of what went down there on Saturday, and it was stunning in the degree of what played out. Described as a massacre by some, butchering by others. It was body after body after body after body. Men, women, children, babies, 40 babies found dead, some of them decapitated. Other people had limbs cut off, some were burnt to death. Meanwhile, on the other side of the border in Gaza, misery of a different kind as people woke up today to flattened neighborhoods, mountains of rubble from which they pulled bodies on a day in which the blockade has kicked in fully. No electricity, no fuel. Dwindling food supplies, water was cut off, dwindling medical supplies in the hospitals now overrun with people from the airstrikes. It is a horror show on both sides of the border, and as Israel now contemplates whether or not to make a ground attack, the consensus seems to be that this will not be lasting days or weeks, but rather months. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Jerusalem.
U.S. President Joe Biden addressed the conflict between Israel and Hamas today from the White House. He says the United States stands firmly on the side of Israel.
And we will make sure Israel has what it needs to take care of its citizens, defend itself, and respond to this attack.
Biden condemned the attacks by Hamas on Israel and said there's no justification for terrorism. The U.S. president says at least 14 American citizens are known to be among those who have died. Major air carriers around the world have stopped or cut back flights into and out of Israel because of the ongoing fighting. That's left thousands of tourists stranded in the country. The Canadian government is currently discussing plans to get citizens out by air, land, and sea as soon as conditions permit. Other countries, like Austria, are sending military planes to collect citizens.
It's an unfortunate situation, but I know everyone's working hard to get everyone to the place they need to. So yeah, and we're trying to do the best of the situation, and I'm sure we'll find a way to get back home.
Many visitors cut their trips short because of the violence. Tourism is a key part of Israel's economy, with about 4% of its workforce employed in the industry. Israelis are also having a hard time getting back to the country. Israel's national carrier El Al is bringing more flights to bring reservists back from around the world to assist in the country's largest mobilization in history. Today was the deadline for Canada to get dozens of diplomats out of India. The Indian government issued the ultimatum last week. It's part of India's response to Canadian allegations of credible evidence linking the Indian government to the June murder of a Sikh activist in British Columbia. India ordered Canada to recall 41 diplomats from the High Commission in New Delhi. It has threatened to revoke diplomatic immunity for any additional staff who are not gone by the end of the day. Canada had a total of 62 diplomats in the country. Some lower-level diplomatic staff who were stationed outside of New Delhi have been relocated to Kuala Lumpur and to Singapore over the last several weeks. The new slate of members was elected today for the UN's top human rights body. Russia failed in its bid to return to the Geneva-based Human Rights Council.
Bulgaria, 160. Albania, 123. Russian Federation, 83.
The election is seen as a key test of Western efforts to keep Moscow isolated. Russia was ousted from the council 18 months ago following its invasion of Ukraine. Some diplomats thought Russia had a reasonable chance of getting back on the council amid creeping signs of Ukraine war fatigue. The next three-year term begins January 1st. A walkout by workers at General Motors in Canada ended just hours after it began. The union announced a tentative agreement was reached this afternoon. CBC's Stephanie Skenderis has the latest.
They hit the picket line at midnight. About 4,300 unionized workers striking at General Motors plants in Oshawa, St. Catharines, and Woodstock, Ontario, after the deadline for contract talks passed with no deal.
We have bargained through the night. 90 minutes of sleep for me, so we're still at it.
The workers wanted the same deal reached 3 weeks ago with Ford, a tactic known as pattern bargaining.
Pattern bargaining has a long tradition in the labor movement of unions being able to effectively extract concessions from employers by using a basic divide and conquer strategy. So you have an industry with multiple employers. The union will target the employer that they feel is in the best position to set industry standards.
And the GM workers had another bargaining chip. The Oshawa assembly plant builds the Chevy Silverado pickup truck, GM's top-selling vehicle.
Taking Silverados and Silverado HDs offline is $10,000 of profit per model. So it's very expensive for GM to lose that plant for any length of time, 12 hours or 12 days. So solving the strike differences quickly is all for GM's benefit.
And they did. 13 hours after the strike began, a tentative agreement was reached. Workers back on the job by 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The terms of the 3-year GM deal are essentially identical to Ford's. They include base hourly wage increases of nearly 20% for production and 25% for skilled trades, reactivation of the cost of living allowance, the conversion of all full-time temporary workers with at least 1 year of seniority to permanent status, and a defined benefits-style pension plan.
This is an agreement that is going to change people's lives, particularly folks who were in precarious employment.
Unifor members still need to vote on the deal to make it official. The union will be looking to Chrysler parent company Stellantis to match the pattern next. Stephanie Skenderis, CBC News, Toronto.
Frontline healthcare workers were hailed as heroes, especially during the pandemic. Many of them paid a high price as they worked to help others during that time. Now, a filmmaker in British Columbia is on a personal mission to collect and tell their stories. CBC's Sohrab Sandhu has more.
Mystery virus they'd hoped to contain, but one we now know can jump from human to human.
Amir Bautista has been working in healthcare for the last 3 years. He says the first-hand experience has been an eye-opener.
It is really hard. It is really daunting.
An established filmmaker himself, Bautista is now documenting the challenge his fellow workers have been facing in the industry.
This documentary hopefully will make people understand that the healthcare system is not the one taking care of us, But today is the right time that we should take care of the healthcare system.
Titled Bayani, a Filipino word for heroic, he says the documentary sheds light specifically on the plight of Filipino healthcare workers who often work in dangerous conditions.
People call them heroes. I call them survivors.
The documentary is being produced in partnership with Filipino BC as a part of series gathering stories of and by Filipinos.
We wanted to highlight the stories that our community has known about, and these are stories that we know because our friends, our family have been working in the healthcare sector and have been affected directly by the pandemic.
Having finished his initial set of interviews with healthcare workers, Bautista is now looking to expand the scope of documentary.
So we will be heading with more important pieces of the research, key people, like the leaders, and of course our frontline workers, even the community.
The makers of the film say government needs to do more in gathering race-related data in healthcare settings to understand the disproportionate impact of the pandemic on Filipino and other racialized communities. Sohrab Sandhu, CBC News, Vancouver.
Coming up on CBC, find out why Virden, Manitoba is home to an incredible and extensive collection of costumes, in big part thanks to volunteers like Fran. Stay tuned.
We will. Our Marcy Marcusa up next. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. The town of Virden in southwestern Manitoba is home to an extensive collection of clothing, shoes, and accessories curated and cared for by a small team of volunteers. Some of the items are used for local productions at the town's historic Odd Theatre. Others are rented out both locally and even globally. They call it a collection that is second to none in North America. When the CBC's Marcy Marcusa was in Virden recently as part of our CBC Communities in Focus tour, she found herself at the costume closet.
So I found myself at the costume closet in Virden. I am in a 4,000 square foot space where there's some 60,000 individual pieces, and they're largely maintained, some of them made, many of them collected by volunteers here. And this is a sea of color. There are dresses, rows of hats that are stacked upon each other, and rows of beads. It is just incredible. Fran Bayless is here to talk to us about it.
The costume closet began when Arlene Collier found her house overrun with costumes in the bedrooms, in the attic, and so on, and decided to approach the town of Virden for a space in the civic center in the basement of the Odd Theatre. When the town agreed to give her space, she brought her costume items into that space, and it grew from there.
Make sure
this is the
put it on
back.
the hat.
This hat is from Eaton's.
Really? And when would this date to? Look how tiny the head would have been.
Yes, often the hats are.
I feel like I should be like more refined. So were all of these pieces then over the years been donated by different people?
The majority of the items in the costume closet had been donated. There's the odd piece that has been sewn for productions or Halloween, things like that, but the majority have been donated.
What's it like to be in a place like Virden that has a theater like that, and the productions that happen every year, and to be able to have this kind of a resource to outfit the performers with?
It's amazing. We couldn't put a production on without it.
This one's got a bird on it. Fran, I think you would look good. What's your color? What's your jam?
I wore this hat to the first tea party that we had.
Okay. We'll give it, oh, this is like a bird hat. Here. Look how lovely you look. All right. What keeps you going in here and keeps you caretaking this collection, which is so well organized and preserved?
Well, of course, the love of being here and the love of looking after the costumes, but financially, we run on donations. We just rent our items. We don't sell anything. It's just on a rental basis, and as long as we make enough money to pay our expenses for the year, we're happy.
Thank you for showing us just the treasure that you have here. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Doesn't that look like a fun place to play? You could go in there and come up with some fabulous Halloween costumes, I would think.
Yeah, many people driving down the highway before October 31st to get the costumes.
Virden, I think. On the weekend coming up, we've got something special to look forward to.
Yeah, you know, if you love watching the sky, solar eclipse. It's a partial eclipse here, but it happens on Saturday morning. Here are some details. And, you know, if you're in somewhere around Oregon and a line from there down to Texas, you get to see a pretty much full eclipse. It's called an annular eclipse, so that means it kind of looks like a diamond ring. There's one little part that has a spot of sun sticking through, so not completely 100%, but that's where the almost total eclipse is. If you're a little farther away, you get to see a little bit less of it. So in Winnipeg, we're kind of in that 45 to maybe 50%. This happens on Saturday morning. The timing of it looks like this. The partial eclipse begins at 9:28, and then for us, our maximum at around that 45 to 50% is at 10:42, and you'll see the moon kind of taking a bite out of the sun, okay? But if you're going to look at this, please, not sunglasses. You need special glasses to look through to view the eclipse safely. And then it's all done and the moon moves off the sun by about noon. If you want to see specific times, go to timeanddate.com. You can even Google that and go eclipse Winnipeg and you'll find the times, or Portage La Prairie or Thompson. A little bit less of a bite of the sun farther north and farther northeast. These are the temperatures right now. 11s and 12s all across the map. Very consistent geography-wise and very consistent time-wise. We've got a 14 in Melita. It's 8 in Kenora right now, 7 in Red Lake. And to the north, we've got lots of 11s right out to the west and also through Thompson and Norway House. Single digits back to the east, where it'll be like that tomorrow, too, with a little bit more in the way of cloud cover. But pretty much a clear province right now. We see lows tonight anywhere from 3 to 5 under cloudy skies. In northwestern Ontario, we'll get down to 2 in Winnipeg, 6 in Gimli, so staying a little bit milder. The water's warmer, really, and with an easterly wind, it's drawing that slightly warmer air off the lake and into the Gimli area, so that's why it's a little bit warmer. Less cloud cover out toward Brandon, Swan River, Dauphin, so temperatures overnight are a little bit cooler. More frost in Brandon tonight. 2s and a -1, a -2 across the north. Starting to see a lot more minuses creeping into the forecast conditions. 12 to 14 in the west, 11 again in Thompson, and then cloudier with single digits out to the east. Gillam, Island Lake, God's Lake, Shamattawa. Back here in the south, we're looking at 10s and 11s. 13, though, in Swan River, much like the Paw. 11 for Portage, for Carman, Morden, and Winkler. Here in Winnipeg, we'll see a high of 11, 12 in Emerson, 10s and 11s back to the east, and a little bit more cloud cover as well back to the east, and anywhere from 8 to 10 in northwestern Ontario with cloudy skies for your Tuesday.
Thanks very much, John.
You're welcome.
He was a beloved entertainer whose TV show was regular viewing for many children in Canada, including myself. Ernie Coombs was the man behind Mr. Dressup. I met him once and it was a thrill. Now there's a new documentary about his life and legacy. Eli Glasner has more on that.
Maybe you remember the music or the tickle trunk.
Oh, here's an interesting one.
If you're Canadian and a certain age, there's a good chance you spent a good part of your childhood with this guy.
Oh, would you like to have an airplane ride with me?
He was Ernie Coombs to his family, but for over 30 years, Mr. Dressup taught us how to make crafts and care.
Oh.
Coombs died in 2001, but a new documentary has him back on our screens with some surprising revelations.
Most people don't even realize that they were very close friends.
It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood.
Coombs first met Fred Rogers working on his kids' show in the U.S. When the CBC hired Rogers to create a Mr. Rogers prototype, there was only one man who shared his vision.
It was a philosophy they shared. Fred Rogers chose Ernie very specifically to come to Canada.
I remember Dad telling us that.
Coombs' daughter says Fred Rogers inspired Dressup's direct style.
Fred told him to look at the camera as a child. That's the child that you're speaking to. It's not an audience, it's a child.
Well, that was an amazing gift. Thanks very much, Granny.
Oh, you're welcome, Mr. Dressup.
Like many, the puppeteer for Granny was starstruck when they met.
I just remember staring at him.
She says as families are feeling this squeeze, she misses his approach.
Hey, you got some tape and a piece of paper, which, you know, most people do have, that you can create whole worlds with something that is not really elaborate.
I like to save these, you know.
Turn on a kid's show today, and it's more animation than arts and crafts.
It's cheaper to make and easier to sell around the world and dub in other languages. But then you also have something that isn't grounded in anything real.
More than just an outpouring of affection, the documentary is a reminder of what Ernie Coombs left behind.
We can all choose to slow down, take the time, build something simple, just be present.
Now, you know, we've got to be going along, so...
Eli Glasner, CBC News, Toronto.
It's bye-bye from...
Mr. Dressup!
Bye!
I loved that show when I was little. I just loved it. I also was fond of this little weird bit of Canadiana. A bit of Canadian broadcasting history has gone silent. The longest running segment on CBC Radio aired for the last time yesterday.
The National Research Council official time signal. The beginning of the long dash indicates exactly 1 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time.
Now, of course, for us, it was 12 noon, and then you'd hear Radio Noon start, wouldn't you? The National Research Council time signal was first heard on CBC November 5th, 1939. It aired every day for 84 years, such a piece of Canadiana. But since you can now listen to CBC Radio online and via satellite, there can be delays, which means the time signal may no longer be accurate. 1 week from tonight, Jagged Little Pill, the musical, begins its run in Winnipeg. We hear from one of the musical's Canadian stars after the break. One week from today, Jagged Little Pill, the musical, begins a 7-performance run at the Centennial Concert Hall in Winnipeg. Tonight, the company performs in Regina, and that's where we've reached Jade McLeod, the Ontario-born actor-writer who stars in the show in the role of Joe. Hello, Jade. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Being cast in a pivotal role in a North American tour of any big musical is a huge deal. What is it about this musical and the role of Joe that's meaningful to you?
You know, this show is such a powerful piece of art that was created, and I'm not just saying that because it, you know, decided to take me along with it, but it really is. It has a very powerful message, and to sing Alanis's music, which is A, so iconic, but B, is written by a Canadian, to sing that as a Canadian is so cool, so exciting. And as for the role of Joe, I mean, this is the first role in my professional career where I've gotten to just bring A, my whole self to the table, but also every trick I know. Like every comedic skill I have gets exercised, every rock vocal I've used in my room to my mom's disdain, you know, I get to bring it all, and it's great.
A lot of people know that album so well. They love that album so much. I myself have bellowed along with it in the car many, 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 many times. How does it feel to really belt out these songs on stage?
I mean, it's visceral, right? Her music accesses something, I think, in all of us that is hard to describe. It just like, it's like this tsunami of emotion and angst every single night. And it's a gift to get to experience that and to be kind of this channel for that with our audience. Yeah.
You yourself are non-binary. Your character Joe's on their own journey trying to figure out who they are. What have you heard from audience members about that?
Oh God, that's been, I think, the most beautiful part, is connecting with trans and non-binary youth across North America and people well into adulthood that are still figuring themselves out, to get to be the person that they see on stage and resonate with and makes them feel like there's nothing wrong with them and that it's okay for them to be who they are. That is an immense responsibility. It's a thing I don't take lightly at all. But it's truly been the greatest gift.
The greatest gift, because it sounds like it could be a lot to carry.
It is, and you know, there's also the flip side of that, right? Where there's people that I'm the first openly non-binary person that they've shared a room with, that they know of, and they might feel some type of way about that. But if it's up to me, and if I've done my job correctly, by the end of the night, they've laughed with me and cried with me and rooted for me and seen themselves in me and seen me as a human being rather than just this idea that they don't really know a lot about, you know?
I know, as much as I can know yet. But I'll know more in a week when you bring the show to Winnipeg. Thank you for all the love and energy you're pouring out on this tour.
Ah, thank you. It's awesome. It really is.
John Sauter's back with your 7-day forecast after the break, and then we've got a daily lift to send you off with a smile. Stay with us.
Well, out that big window right behind Janet, I can see the clouds already moving in from the east. So increasing cloud tonight, a lot more cloud around tomorrow. 11s and 12s for the next few days, even on into the weekend, where we'll see varying amounts of sun and clouds for the rest of this week. And no rain in the forecast at all. Janet, have you picked up your pumpkin yet?
Of course not. I'm not that organized.
Well, you know what, neither have I. But it is that time of year when some folks go out looking for that perfect pumpkin for the outdoor decorations.
Something you can really carve, make a beautiful jack-o'-lantern. There's so many different types available now. How do you pick the right one? Here's today's Daily Lift.
Every single pumpkin is unique, just like you and I. So when you're looking at your pumpkin, first of all, think about what kind of design or carving you want to do. So do you want one that's kind of tall and skinny, or one that's short and wide? And then what color you want too, because there's so many different colors of pumpkins now as well. Once you start actually finding your pumpkin, you want to take a look around the whole entire thing. You want to look out for cuts and bruises. So if you see any cuts that are gone right through the pumpkin, put that one aside, because sadly that won't last till Halloween. If you do notice a small little bruise, maybe a dent that was put there by a rat, simply use some Vaseline and just kind of cover the hole, and then that will prevent any air getting inside and rotting the pumpkin out. And you also want to watch out for around the stem. So make sure the stem is sturdy, and sometimes the stem will crack off, but as long as it's not soft by where the stem is too, then that will still be okay. And again, Vaseline is your friend. And you want to keep it out of extreme heat and extreme cold. So don't put it right next to a heater. And if you have it outside, which you can certainly do, as we have lots of our pumpkins outside right now, you just want to keep an ear to the weather. And if you hear frost, simply cover it. So cover it with an old blanket, or take it inside for that night as well.
Interesting.
Yeah, I didn't think of any of it. Vaseline, really?
So I guess if you carved it early,
yeah,
and you wanted to keep it from getting all shriveled,
yeah,
you take the Vaseline along the cuts and seal it up.
Okay.
There it is.
All right. Do you keep the seeds and anything?
Yeah, I've done that before, to roast them, because I think they're yummy when you roast them. It's also great, though, for using as a decorative aid coming out of the mouth.
Send us your pictures.
The jack-o'-lantern. Have a great night.
See ya.